Hello, my dear friends. Good morning to all of you. And here we are to begin a new lesson on geography. That is lesson number 4. It is about agriculture, a very famous topic for all of us. And I'm quite sure you all must have seen your own family members working in the field, cultivating so many things and getting the harvest and so on. So agriculture is a very essential thing for us because agriculture is the one that provides food for all the living beings, especially the human beings. And if that agriculture is not going on well, then we cannot think about survival, because without food nobody can survive. Therefore, the production of food, that is concentrated on this agriculture, and that is very much important. So in this lesson we'll study about different types of cultivation, different types of farming, and what are the main means of production, why we need to produce more, all those things we shall study in this lesson. So you can take your lesson number 4, geography, and page number 34. So India is an agriculturally important country. Two-thirds of its population is engaged in agricultural activities. Agriculture is a primary activity which produces most of the food that we consume. And besides food grains, it also produces raw materials for various industries. So it's a just introduction, and we know India is an agricultural country, and two-thirds of the population of our country is involved in production of agricultural things. So how much two-thirds means? Two-thirds, that means almost 60, you can say 66. 66% of the people are working in agriculture, and that is a primary sector. I hope you remember what we learned earlier, the 3 sectors: primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. So agriculture falls in the primary sector, and 66% of the people are working in agriculture. And again, the agriculture produces not only food items, it is also producing raw material for other industries. For example, cotton. Cotton is grown in the land, and that is used for textile industry. Or jute, that is also used for other industries, for making ropes and dresses and other products. So not only the food products are attained from agriculture, but also quite a lot of raw materials are also coming out from this agriculture. And can you name some of the industries based on agriculture raw material? So we said cotton, which is used for textile industry, and also jute, and then sugarcane, which is used for sugar industry, and so on. Then, moreover, some agriculture products like tea, coffee, spices, etc. are exported. So some of the things that we produce more, like tea, coffee, and other some of the spices and so on, we produce more than what we need. Therefore, we can export it to other countries, and we'll be able to get foreign exchange. We'll be able to get foreign money. So agriculture is the most important thing in our country, and therefore it is providing employment to so many people, it is providing food for so many people, and it is bringing us foreign money and so on by exporting it to other countries. So that's just a little introduction about the agriculture. Now let us see what are the types of farming. The various types of farming. And agriculture is an age-old economic activity in our country. Over these years, cultivation methods have changed significantly depending upon the characteristics of physical environment. Technological know-how and socio-cultural practices. And farming varies from subsistence to commercial type. So there are different types of farmings are there. One is called subsistence farming, another one is called commercial farming, and so on. And at present, in different parts of India, the following farming systems are practiced. So let us learn one by one. There are different types of farmings are there. And let us see in India what are these type of farming that is practiced. So first is primitive subsistence farming. So primitive subsistence farming. Let us see what it is. This type of farming is still practiced in few pockets of India. So it is primitive methods, and now as the people are progressing and becoming modernized, this is not practiced widely, but still in few areas, few pockets of India, that is few corners of India where the development has not reached, people are still following that old primitive methods that is still available. Primitive subsistence agriculture is practiced on small patches of land with the help of primitive tools like hoe, dao, and digging sticks, and family or community labor. So, what is this primitive methods? They use the primitive tools. So, it is not a big large area, maybe a small area of a family, their property, and then you use hoes. Hoe means the plow for plowing. Then they use stick for digging. Then they use dao for cutting. All these things. So they don't use any modern methods or technology. They use the traditional thing that we are using hundreds of years ago, digging with a spade, digging with a stick, or cutting everything with dao and so on. Then they don't hire any people from outside. No laborers are called from outside. They call only their own family members, the parents and the children. They all work together, and just for their own family maintenance. They are not intending to produce plenty and sell it outside and make profit and so on. That is not their intention. It is just meant for their own purpose, their own consumption. That is the purpose. And this type of farming depends upon monsoon, natural fertility of the soil, and sustainability of other environmental conditions to the crops grown. So here this is small areas and it is far away from the mainland, therefore there is no modern facilities available. They don't get irrigation facility, they don't get any other laborers available, so they completely depend on monsoon season for monsoon rain. If 1 year rain is less, then that crops may not grow very well. If the rain is too much, then it may get spoiled again. So they are completely depending on the nature, the climate, the weather and so on. Otherwise, the weather is good, they'll get good harvest. If not good, then they will suffer. That is the condition in the primitive subsistence farming. It is a slash and burn agriculture. So it is another name for it is called slash and burn. They cut down the forest or the trees, the grass, everything, then they burn it and they cultivate there. Farmers clear a patch of land and produce cereals and other food crops to sustain their family. So they cultivate what are the things? Food crops, cereals and so on. For the sustenance of the family, that is very important. They are not intending to sell it outside, just meant for sustaining their own family members. And when the soil fertility decreases, the farmers shift and clear a fresh patch of land for cultivation. So they cultivate for a few years, then the soil becomes less fertile, the production becomes less and less. Then they abandon that land and they move to another place. They will try to search a new place and try to do the same thing there. They cut down everything there and they will burn it and they will cultivate there. And this type of shifting allows nature to replenish the fertility of the soil through natural processes. So why do they leave this land for some time? They leave it so that in the course of time, after a few years, that land will become fertile again. So nature will do the work and make it fertile again. If we continue to go on cultivating the same land again and again, then that land will no chance of getting fertile. But if you leave it free for a few years, then by natural process it will become fertile again, and the farmer can come back and cultivate there again, and he will get good harvest. And this type of shifting allows nature to replenish the fertility of the soil through natural process. Land productivity in this type of agriculture is low, as the farmer does not use fertilizers or other modern inputs. So when farmers do this cultivation, slash and burn cultivation or primitive subsistence farming, they don't use any fertilizers, they don't sprinkle any pesticides and so on. It is purely organic, and they do it in a very natural way. They don't use anything that is external or anything that is foreign. They use only what they have, the natural manures, the natural fertilizers, all these things they use. And therefore their products are very good and hygienic. It is not harmful to the health also. And it is known by different names in different parts of the country. So this is practiced in different parts of the country, especially in the hills areas. And one name is that it is primitive subsistence farming. Another name, some places it is called slash and burn cultivation. In some other places it is called by different names again. Let us see. So can you name some such types of farming? So you may be able to tell what the people call it in their own local dialect, this type of cultivation. So it is zooming in northeastern states like Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland. So most of the states in northeast, what do they call this kind of cultivation? They call it zooming cultivation. So which are the states calling it zooming? So Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland, they call it zooming cultivation. Then in Manipur it is called Pamlo. The people of Manipur call it Pamlo. Then Dipa in Basta district of Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh people, they call it Dipa. And in Andaman and Nicobar Islands also they call it same. So we see the same type of cultivation is carried out throughout the country or different corners of the country where places are very interior and no modern facilities are available, and therefore the people call it in their own language, in their own dialect, different names, but the style of cultivation is same. The same thing is practiced everywhere, only name is different. And let us see about it a little more. So zooming or slash and burn agriculture is known as milpa in Mexico. So we learn different names in India. Now let us see different names in other countries, foreign countries. In Mexico it is known as milpa, and Central America it is known as conuco, and in Venezuela it is known as roca. In Brazil it is known as masoli. In Central Africa it is known as ladang or masoli. It is known as in Central Africa. Then it is in Indonesia it is known as ladang, and in Vietnam it is known as ray. So different countries are also following it, and they have got different names. Once again let us see the names. So in Mexico it is known as milpa. Then in Central America also it is known as milpa. So Mexico and Central America it is known by same name. What is it? Milpa. Then cocuno, that is the name it is known as in Peninsula. Then in Brazil it is known as roca. Then in Central Africa it is known as masoli. Then in Indonesia it is known as ladang. Then in Vietnam it is known as ray. So this slash and burn cultivation or zooming cultivation, it is practiced in many corners of the world, and different people call it by different names. So in India this primitive form of cultivation is called bivar or dahiya in Madhya Pradesh. So again we come back to India, in different parts of India, and what is it known as? So in Madhya Pradesh, what is it known as? It is known as Bivar, or another name is there, Dakia. Then Podu or Penda in Andhra Pradesh. So Andhra Pradesh people also practice this kind of cultivation, and they call it Podu or Penda. Then Pema Dabi or Koban or Binga in Odisha. So Odisha people are calling it by different names. What are they? Some call it Pema Dabi, some call it Koman, or some call it Bringa. Kumari in Western Ghats. In Western Ghats people are calling it Kumari, the Western Mountains. Then Valdre or Valtre in Southeastern Rajasthan. Southeastern Rajasthan people call it, what are they calling it? Valdre or Valtre. Then Kahil or Khil in the Himalayan belt. In the Himalayan belt, along the like Himachal Pradesh and so, people call it Khil. Then in Jharkhand people are calling it Kurua, the name called Kurua. And Juming in northeastern region. So again we say in northeast, in generally it is known as Juming. We said Manipur, they call it different name, Pamlo. So different people have got different names, but Juming it is generally used in northeast to express this type of cultivation. So you can remember at least some of the names different people call in different countries, and in even in different states in India also. Let us see a little small case. So Rencha lived with her family in a small village of the outskirts of Diffu in Assam. She enjoys watching her family members cleaning, slashing and burning a patch of land for cultivation. She often helps them in irrigating the fields with water running through the bamboo canal from the nearby spring. She loves the surroundings and wants to stay here as long as she can. But this little girl has no idea about the declining fertility of the soil and her family's search for fresh a patch of land in the next season. So it is about a girl called Rencha, and she is living in Assam called Diffu, and she is living there, and her family members are doing this Juming cultivation, slash and burn, and she likes that surroundings. The field is surrounded by jungles, this side jungles, that side jungles, so she likes that scenery, beautiful scenery, and she likes to go and stay there. She likes that place very much, but her family is planning something different. Her family has realized this land is no more fertile. If we continue to cultivate here, it will be a loss. So they are planning to shift next year to another place and create a new field and cultivate there. So this little girl is not aware about that. So that is the effect of Jum cultivation. The family is shifting to another place. Then can you name the type of farming Rincha's family is engaged in? Can you enlist some crops which are grown in such farming? So we said about this example of Rincha. What type of cultivation is her family doing? It is Juming, slash and burn. And what are the things usually they plant? Usually they plant rice, or sometimes they plant other vegetables like cabbage. Some places they will plant wheat, bajra and so on. So different items they cultivate. So that is about primitive subsistence farming. Now let us see another type of subsistence farming, that is called intensive. Intensive subsistence farming. This type of farming is practiced in areas of high population pressure on land. So primitive subsistence farming is done by people who are living in the outskirts or interior places. But here the intensive subsistence farming is done in the place where people are living very thickly populated places. So where there are very high population, the pressure on the land is very high. For example, in the town, you will find very little land free for cultivation. Everybody will be trying to make their houses and other buildings and filling the land. And so many people are living there, and there is no place for cultivation. So maybe a small courtyard may be there behind the house, little area may be there, and so on. So the land is very little, but the number of people are more. The population is high. Therefore, there is a lot of pressure on the land to produce more vegetables, to produce more food items, grain items for satisfying the hunger of these people. So, where the land is less and the people are more, that is called, such kind of places they need to do different type of cultivation. That is called intensive subsistence farming. Let us see what it is. So it is labor intensive farming. So what is the difference? Here there is no labor, only family members are working. But here lot of laborers will be required, because they have to cultivate in a hurry, we can say. They have to cultivate and get the harvest very fast. So they will call more people and do the work and try to finish up the harvest very fast. And it is labor intensive farming, where high doses of biochemical inputs and irrigation are used for obtaining higher production. So it is just opposite to primitive intensive farming. In the primitive intensive farming, they don't use any chemical fertilizers, they don't use any pesticides, they don't use irrigation, they don't call laborers. But here it's all just the opposite. They will be calling a lot of laborers, they will be using a lot of fertilizers and pesticides, and they will be using a lot of laborers, and they will be getting the irrigation facility and so on. So intensive subsistence farming is just opposite of what is happening in the primitive subsistence farming. And can you name some of the states of India where such farming is practiced? So can you say where this intensive farming is practiced? So the states which have got high population, they all follow this, like Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. All these states are practicing intensive subsistence farming. So though the right of inheritance leading to the division of land among successive generations has rendered land holding size uneconomical, the farmers continue to take maximum output from the limited land in the absence of alternative sources of livelihood. Thus, there is enormous pressure on the agricultural land. So, we know as the family is growing, the parents will divide the land among the children. Suppose a family has got 100 acres of land and he has got 4 children, let's say 4 sons, and he will divide his property into 4 pieces. So he had 100 acres and now he has got 4 sons and he will divide it, and then one son will get only 25 acres of land. Remember, his father had 100 and his son is getting only 25%. So land has become only 1/4. And now this son has got again 4 sons, let us say. He is getting 4 children, 4 sons. So that 25 acres he has to divide again into 4 pieces. So one person will get maybe just 6 point something, will not get 7. Will be getting less than 7 acres. So there will be more pressure. So with the 100 acres, the grandfather could feed the family of 4 children. Now his son has to feed the 4 children from the product of 25 acres. And now his son has to produce to feed his family just from 6 acres. So as the population is increasing, the family is getting divided, and the area also has to divide for each children, and the area becomes smaller and smaller. So when there was 100 acres for the grandfather, he did not have to worry much, because plenty of land, 100 acres means plenty of land, and he has got only 4 children. So to feed that 4 children and the parents, 6 people together. So that 100 acres is more than enough. He doesn't have to worry too much. He doesn't have to think about I have to produce more to feed my children. No, it's normal cultivation is enough. He'll be able to produce enough food. But when it comes to his son, who has got 25 acres of land now, he has to work little more harder than his father to provide food for his family. And when it comes to his son, the land becomes smaller still. It's only just six and a half acres of land. He has to work much more harder than his grandfather or his father and grandfather to provide food because the area becomes smaller and smaller. And you can imagine after 2 more generations what will happen. The land will become maybe 1 acre or 2 acres, and then he have to work still harder and harder to provide enough food, to produce enough food for his family. So that is the situation that people are forced to do this intensive farming. So they try to provide or try to produce maximum food grains from there. So for that they have to use chemicals, they have to use the pesticides, they have to provide water for irrigation, and they have to use modern technology like a tractor and so on, and they have to hire more laborers to work because here the primitive they cultivate only once in a year, that is during the monsoon season, because there is no irrigation facility. They cannot cultivate more than that another. After the monsoon they cannot cultivate because there is no water facility. But in the intensive subsistence farming, they provide irrigation. Therefore 2 times or 3 times in a year they will be cultivating. Once they will cultivate paddy, after that they will cultivate wheat, then again they will cultivate some other cereals or like potatoes and beans or cabbage. So many things they will cultivate. So throughout the year the land will be, so here in a year only once it is cultivated, here maybe 3 times. So we can imagine 3 times in a year it is cultivated, and the soil becomes less and less fertile because more and more vegetables or other crops are growing there. Therefore the soil becomes less and less fertile. Therefore they have to provide more manure, more fertilizers, and they have to provide more waters and so on. That's why the land becomes more and more less fertile, and the farmer provides more fertilizers. And though the right of inheritance leading to the division of land among successive generations has rendered whole land holding size uneconomical, the farmers continue to take a maximum output from the limited land in the absence of alternative source of livelihood. So these people have no other source of livelihood. If they don't cultivate in the land that they have, then they all will be starving. The family will be starving. There will be no other means for them to survive. Therefore, the maximum, try to cultivate maximum. Throughout the year, they will try to work, and if they need more help, they will try to call other workers, and so that is how they will try to perform this their duty and try to produce enough food for the family. So that way, intensive subsistence farming is taking place. So in the next class we shall learn about another type of farming called commercial farming. So for today we learn 2 types of farming. One is very common in the northeast and other interior parts of India called primitive subsistence farming. And in that primitive subsistence farming, the most famous type of farming is called jumming or slash and burn, which is practiced in most of the hill places in northeast. People they cut down the forest and the trees and the grass, everything, then burn it, then they plant there. And then they use not the modern technology, they use spade, dao, all these ordinary primitive tools they are using. And they don't call other laborers, their own family members manage the work. And so here the expense is less and they don't produce much high because they just produce only for their own family. But here the tendency is, here the land has become very less and they don't have a lot of land, small area of land may be there, and therefore the family members will be high, and therefore they have to produce a lot of food in order to satisfy the hunger of different people, different family members. Therefore they are forced to use the fertilizers, the irrigation facility, the pesticide and so on, and try to produce more food so that it will be sufficient for feeding all the family members. So they will be using modern technology, they will be using more labors and so in order to produce more food. That is called intensive subsistence farming. So try to read again and try to understand the different points and different names of the subsistence farming and so on. So for today we shall wind it up and we'll meet you again in the next class. Okay, until then, bye.